Hi, I'm Zanzi. Welcome back to another episode of Food from Zanzi's podcast, Farmers Inside Track. I am your host, Patricia Tembo, and this episode is powered by the Red Meat Producers Organization. Today's topic is the innovations and technology that is shaping the future of the red meat industry. And my colleague, Lisa Canyavenia, is joined by Michaela Pretorius, a technical manager at Cavalier.
Welcome to Farmers Inside Track, Michaela Pretorius. Michaela, what innovations in meat production do you think most influence your trust in the quality and safety of the meat you buy?
So obviously the consumer wants to know three basic things, and that's, is what they're buying, is it what it says it is it environmentally conscious, and is it safe for their family? So those are the three things that they really focus on. And so what comes to mind is things like feed additives that we put when we feed our cattle or sheep, breed developments on how to improve them, and the controls in place to make sure that we allow for consistent quality, but also things like animal welfare and a little bit more new trendy practices like regenerative practices play a role.
How important is transparency, such as traceability and ethical sourcing, to your purchasing decisions when it comes to red meat?
Traceability throughout the red meat value chain basically cements the trust that you're buying what you get. And it needs to be all the way from farm to the final product, to your steak or your chop that the consumer is eating, and will be placed on shelves. And that's really a major focus in our industry as a whole, especially with the increase in incidence of animal diseases. You may have heard of foot and mouth that's doing its round in the country. Our national departments of animal health really rely heavily on the private sector to support their actions and really control movement of cattle, control movements of animals, ensure that the traceability of each animal and owner is maintained. But I think it's also not just on the live animal side that's really getting a bit of focus on in South Africa. It's also a traceability system to your final product, to that steak or that mince or that chop that you put on shelf. And it's really gaining momentum of how can we prove that what we're putting on shelf can go all the way back to the animal that got slaughtered or the animal or the farm that it was raised on. And things like DNA analysis is getting quite a lot of attention at the moment, specifically Marks and Spencer's. If you don't know it, they're in the UK, they're a retailer in the UK. They're really focusing on doing this DNA traceability, being able to say, this piece of meat was made up of these specific DNA from these specific cattle. Traceability is really fundamental to help that openness and that integrity, to show the integrity of the value chain. In terms of ethical sourcing, to go back to your question, the red meat industry really has a responsibility to reduce our environmental impact, and things like regenerative agriculture practices are really becoming vital to implement. We need to shift our agricultural production practices to not only just reduce the emissions, but also remove the carbon from the atmosphere and really placing it back into the soil. And that's what regenerative is. It's trying to become more efficient, producing more on a smaller piece of land while positively impacting the environment. So we really don't want to put more animals on a piece of land and negative. We want to build up that environment, the felt that our animals are grazing on. Of our farmers have been able to double even their capacity on their farm just by changing the way that they farm from the conventional and really drastically improving the diversity of their grass species and the insect species on their farm. And it's really small changes that make really big impacts. If I can give you an example, for parasite management practices, for instance, they've adjusted their use of antibiotics because they saw that it was killing the dung beetles, and we need the dung beetles to be able to put the manure and the fecal matter back into the soil and really help fertilize the ground. So those kind of things is new ways of looking at what we were doing all the time that really makes an impact.
And in terms of traceability and consumer responsibility, are there any perhaps extra precautions that consumers can take once they have the product on their hands, which is the red meat, of course, in this case?
In terms of traceability, once they've bought it, they need to know that what they're buying is right. From a consumer perspective, you need to be able to consciously buy from, retailers or the shelves that you feel the most comfortable, that you've built the trust with. It's not to say that everybody does something different or something negative, but you need to make sure that you know your expectations and what you want for your family and for your livelihood. And if you want something that's really high protein, then yes, beef is the way to go. But if you're looking for something lean, then maybe not looking into a Wagyu product, for instance, looking into something else, it's going to give you what you want. So it's hard from a traceability. The customer, they get what they get. And I think it's more the industry's responsibility to guide the customer and to really show what are we doing in the background to help them to be more transparent.
In what ways do you see technology making red meat more convenient, nutritious, or sustainable for everyday consumers?
There's a lot of innovations that are happening throughout the value chain. So if you look at things like in the feed industry, so we're talking about animal nutrition, there is a drive to remove antibiotics, remove growth stimulants, and that's obviously got negative impact with antibiotic resistance and health implications for the consumer. And so by removing that and finding really new innovations to try and replace the functions of what they were typically doing really has a good health implication. But not only that, it has an additional improvement on quality. So some of it, like the growth stimulants, they have a negative implication on your tenderness or your flavor of your product. So by removing it, you're automatically giving the customer something more delicious and more healthy. We have this data conundrum, so you can't measure what you can't measure. And there's a lot of product measurement technology that's around that can help us measure and guide our systems to really improve. It's all about the data that you get so that you can make really educated decisions. And some of these things are like, we've got on our side, we measure tenderness using a tenderometer, which is basically a machine that can measure the tenderness of every bite of meat, and really taking that information and feeding it back to the farmer and being able to say, this is how your trends are looking, and so that they can drive there and implement change and ensure consistency of the raw material or the products that they're supplying us. But I think the biggest thing in terms of sustainability is that we are, as an industry, under the spotlight for greenhouse gas emissions. And there is also, we really are focused on even a factory level being quite a significant producer of greenhouse gas emissions to measure and to record those emissions so that we can aim to reduce it. And things like you look at maybe the way that you utilize your manure or your blood management to put that into compost and fertilizer. How do you increase your solar capacity so that you don't have to pull as much power from the grid? Even the feed additives that I mentioned before, there is better ones that are more efficient, which help to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. And we really are getting this, like some auditing systems that we've also been introduced and to basically keep us on track to our sustainability targets and that reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. For example, Woolworths has started the Battery for the Future campaign. It's very similar to the Fishing for the Future that they've also have on their products. And it's basically just to review how do they track against the sustainability goals for them, but also for Cavalier as a company. Also things like the breed societies, for instance, and the farmers, they're really working hard to improve the quality that they supply. So they really try and look at breeds, how can they adjust their breeds and their animals and farm better to give the customer the best quality in terms of tenderness and juiciness and flavor. But retailers and the packers, so packers like Cavalier, for example, we're really working for ways on how do we validate the claims that we make? How do we validate the breeds that we use? And it becomes important, again, back to the DNA level, is to go and do the genomic testing and check how can we consistently provide the customer what they want and what they need.
Well, it's no secret that a lot has been done so far. Looking ahead, do you think there are any new innovations in the red meat industry to look out for?
As I've mentioned before, DNA is really becoming a very big part, whether it is falling into traceability side, so to being able to trace back from a steak to an animal, if it is from helping innovate, helping us enlighten us on how an animal will do and if he's genetically inclined to produce more efficiently. Those technologies are really advancing and quite fast as well. Traceability systems in general, with the whole foot and mouth disease, the industry is looking into use of RFID tags and making sure that we can trace from the process and how that animal moved from farm to abattoir to final product. So traceability systems is a very big buzz craze at the moment. And then any emission factors, measuring what you can and reducing your emission factors is also one of those big innovation measurement tools that we're looking at. It is very important. We've got the Paris Agreement that we need to adhere to, and we need to reduce our emissions by half. And that's going to take a lot of effort, and it's an entire value chain effort. So companies need to come together to really help and innovate. And how do we put in place aspects and solutions that the industry can use to help reduce those emissions and make us more efficient?
Thank you to Michaela Pretorius, Technical Manager at Cavalier. You can read more on this topic by visiting www.foodforumzansi.co.za. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss any episode. From myself, Patricia Tembo, and the rest of Food Forum Zanzi, thank you for listening and keep growing with us.